Because D-Day was so secret, the ordinary soldiers would generally only have known right at the last minute. So to take one example, when there were troops waiting along the south coast of England ready to go over to Normandy for D-Day, even a few days beforehand, they'd have been briefed on using maps, for example, that had false place names. So they could see where they were going on a map, but they wouldn't actually know where it was. There were various other campaigns that had supported D-Day, prepared the way for it, but what the Allies ultimately had to do was to land somewhere in northwest Europe, advance into Germany and defeat the Nazi regime there. And so that was why D-Day was so important, because that was a vital stage in ending the Second World War in Europe. Early part of the planning was done, a lot of it was done in central London. There was an organisation called Cossack, which stood for Chief of Staff to the Supreme Allied Commander. The Supreme Allied Commander would eventually be Eisenhower, but this was before he'd been appointed, so this is 1943. So they developed effectively the first detailed plan for D-Day, and then when SHAEF comes along in 1944, they basically pick up the Cossack plan and develop it into more detail, more specific to what would actually happen on D-Day. SHAEF stood for Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, and it was the organisation in overall command of the Normandy landings. Of course, a key figure in SHAEF was the man in charge, General Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was the Supreme Allied Commander, so in charge of all Allied forces on D-Day. In early 1944, he moved to Bushy Park, so he spent a lot of his time there for the planning. So this is a SHAEF telephone directory actually dated the 1st of June 1944. And inside is lots of different sections. So there's an alphabetical section, all different more senior officers who were in different branches. And then there's another section covering all different departments of SHAEF. But actually, if you go to the right, looking on the start place, there's a couple of things that might mean something to people who know Bushy Park. So here we've got on the first page the couple of fire stations it lists, and one of those is on Chestnut Avenue, which I believe is a well-known local feature. This is part of a series of maps that were produced in the orders for Operation Neptune, the naval assault for D-Day. And this particular one, this is showing the situation 18 hours before the first troops landed, so H minus 18 hours. And it shows with these dotted lines, or these dashed lines, the length of the coast that the Allied convoys were setting off from. So it's the whole of the south coast and some coming up from places on the east and the west coast of the UK as well. So just this shows how much a large part of the country the troops were embarking at, the ships were heading off from. And again, that comes back to the scale of the plan really, and the job that the planners at SHAEF had to do. It had to cover so many different troops in so many different places, and the naval side of it as well. And then the next map that we've got here following on, this is now so 6 hours later, 12 hours before the first troops landed. And you can see the convoys have all come together just to the further south from where we are here in Portsmouth, off the further south east of the Isle of Wight, heading down across the Channel and heading for Normandy. And you can see at this point they're all more or less mid-Channel, they're all committed to the operation, all heading across on their way to the places where they'd land in Normandy.